Spire Motorsports has officially bought Busch Motorsports. The Brickyard 400 is returning in 2024, and North Wilkesboro once again hosts the All-Star Race in 2024. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to your video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports story discusser today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start talking about Kubota. As it was announced yesterday that Kubota will be returning to Trackhouse in 2024, and they have announced a multi-year extension as a partner and sponsor of Trackhouse Racing that will go through 2025. Kubota will sponsor both Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez in the 2024 season, especially for Ross Chastain, who will sponsor for 7 races in 2024. Kubota has been growing their presence in NASCAR for the last few years, and it's really awesome and great to see they are going to be sticking around and sponsoring Trackhouse Racing for the next few years. Really awesome and really great stuff. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Carrera. As it was announced last night, reported by Adam Stern, that NASCAR has a new licensing deal in 2024 with Carrera to make slot car sets in individual models around Hemric and HMS drivers. This is really cool to see. Carrera is one of the biggest companies when it comes to slot cars. In fact, I think it's probably the biggest company when it comes to slot car sets and slot car tracks. So I think it's really awesome to see that Carrera is coming in and they're going to be working with NASCAR. We've seen a lot of new companies coming into play and working with NASCAR. So I think it's a really awesome and fantastic partnership. And glad to see that they are going to be working with NASCAR and Hemric Motorsports in 2024. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Talladega purse money for this weekend. So, every time we have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity Series, or Truck Series race, Bob Pockets puts out the purse money for the week. And according to Bob Pockets, for the Cup race, it's $8,806,315. And for the truck race, it's $779,970. That is very low purse money for the Truck Series, but for the Cup Series, that is some pretty good money. But remember, for the Cup Series, you do have the charter agreement and the charter money that comes into play right there. Nonetheless, at least for the Cup Series, that's some good money, but for the Truck Series, it isn't the greatest money in the world for this weekend. It's kind of disappointing, but not surprising the money is a little bit low right there. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about F1. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern and Motorsports.com in regards to the growth and popularity of Formula One. Well, according to them, F1 has witnessed a dramatic drop in social media mentions, new followers, and reach off the back of Red Bull's total domination, a new research study has revealed. Obviously, been watching Formula One in the 2023 season. Red Bull has put on a complete domination and a complete clinic this year. Only one race in 2023 has been won by a non-Red Bull, and that was Carlos Sainz at Singapore a few weeks ago. But I don't think that's the only reason why Formula One is beginning to have a little bit of a drop when it comes to growth of the popularity. One of the big reasons is because Formula people, I think, are starting to finally realize that Formula One isn't the most exciting racing in the world. I think a lot of these fans came in from Drive to Survive because we know how successful Drive to Survive was, and it's kind of a little bit of a fad. Sometimes these fads do end up lasting a very long time, but sometimes you have fads that don't last very long. And it's kind of like NASCAR a little bit, where NASCAR was really popular for about 5 or 6 years, and then it kind of started declining a little bit, but I think NASCAR's kind of stabilized. Formula One has had a pretty big rise, but I think they're starting to have a little bit tapering off when it comes to their fall. And they're not completely falling off by any stretch of imagination, but they're not growing like they were last year. And I think the racing last year was also better than what it was in 2023. Now, hopefully these teams can catch up in Formula One to where they can have a better racing product. But overall, I think it is interesting to see that Formula One is talking about this because, again, I think Formula One has kind of fallen off a little bit in that popularity in some instances on social media because they have had a huge drop and increase and such. But I do believe Formula One could have a comeback if they can make the racing product better. But let's be honest, historically, the racing product of Formula One has not been good for a very long time. So I know a lot of fans want it to get better so we can have more increase and stuff, but it sounds like that's not going to happen anytime soon. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Garrett Smithley. As it was announced on Wednesday evening that Garrett Smithley will drive a 02 for Young's Motorsports this weekend at Talladega. I believe Garrett Smithley has made a couple starts at Young's Motorsports in the past, And Garrett Smithley has been pretty decent on super speedway, so that's another big reason why they're bringing him into the organization this weekend. Now, I believe this truck doesn't have the greatest position in owner's points, so I do think they may have enough to get into the show. But it's good to see Garrett Smithley back in the trucksters. Obviously, he's got Trophy Tractor's sponsor, which Trophy Tractor has been working Garrett Smithley for the last few years. That's a pretty big reason why they're going ahead and picking him up for this weekend. Nonetheless, glad to see he's getting an opportunity and shot. Hopefully, he can make the best of it and have a very strong run this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway with Young's Motorsports. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Mike Rockefeller. As it was reported by Austin Kensky from Motorsports Wire, and it's according to the roster portal, that Mike Rockefeller is going to drive a 42 for Legacy Motor Club next weekend at the Charlotte Roval. Not a major shock and surprise considering the fact that Mike Rockefeller is running all the road course races this year. Plus, Mike Rockefeller does have a good friendship, and he, of course, did race with Jimmy Johnson in the 24 Hours of Le Mans with the Garage 56 entry. Now, Mike Rockefeller, to his credit, did have a pretty decent run at the Indy Road Course earlier this year, back in August, where I think he ended up finishing in the top 25 and nearly had a chance to finish in the top 20, because we have seen Legacy Motor Club show a lot more pace and a lot more speed in the second half of this season, albeit there's a couple reasons why for that. You don't have Noah Grayson crashing the cars every single week, but you've also got them focusing a lot more on that team. They're coming up to a better stretch of their schedule. We've seen Eric Jones do a really good job in the last 10 weeks. I think 7 top 10s in the last 10 weeks. And Carson Osbar has been extremely impressive and likely going to get a cup deal because of that going forward. So really awesome stuff. Glad to see that Mike Rockefeller is going to be in the 42. Hopefully he can make the best of it at the Charlotte Roval here really, really soon. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Circuit of the Americas, as they put out a tweet yesterday or Wednesday evening teasing a pretty big announcement. Now, what are they teasing? Well, it sounds like they're teasing what they're going to be doing in 2024. Circuit of Americas more than likely is going to be back on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule in 2024. If you do go to their website, I believe that they do have a race schedule for 2024, but they haven't exactly announced when their date is going to be. I've seen some theories roaming around on social media over the last few weeks, and some people may have been suggesting that maybe we could see Circuit Americas moved away from the spring and maybe moved as that race that could move to the playoffs in 2024. Remember, the Charlotte Roval, which we already kind of talked about this week, is more than likely going to be gone at the end of this year, and they're going to be going back to Charlotte Oval in 2024. NASCAR said that they are looking to maybe add another road course in 2024, and some are theorizing that maybe Circuit Americas could move to the playoffs in 2024. Now, look, as much as I think it'd be cool for COTA to move into the playoffs, one of the reasons why I think that could end up being an issue is because of Formula One. But I have seen some people suggest that maybe NASCAR and F1 could team up for the first time and they could host a doubleheader. The thing is, I don't know if NASCAR and Formula One have a good working relationship. Obviously, Formula One is a global sport. NASCAR is kind of global. They do have the Euro Series, but I think it's kind of a different entity than the NASCAR Cup Series and all the series in the United States. It would be very interesting, though, to see NASCAR have a partnership with Formula One and maybe have COTA as a feeder series and have a really, really big weekend, and maybe we can get some Formula One drivers over at the track. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with the announcement. Obviously, the 2024 schedule we'll talk about here in just a little bit has not been released yet. We're getting closer and closer to that being released, and maybe, just maybe, we're going to see COTA move to later in the year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Frankie Minas. Now, there's been a lot of rumors circling around Frankie Minas when it comes to his future in NASCAR in racing in general. Obviously, Frankie Minas has been running full-time in ARCA in 2023, and he's actually doing a pretty good job in ARCA this year. Now, the last 6-7 races have gone as well for him, but a lot of that's been electrical gremlins and issues and being caught up in wrecks that really are not his fault. And he doesn't drive the best car in the world in ARCA, drives Toretto Jones Racing. They're not the fastest organization in the world. And yeah, he's been in top 3 and top 4 points pretty much the whole entire year in ARCA as they come to the end of their season. But there's been a lot of chatter roaming around Frankie Minas' future, and one of those rides that he could end up driving is a 38 truck for Front Row Motorsports in 2024. Obviously, we know that Zane Smith will not be back in the Truck Series in the 2024 season. And Zane Smith, of course, is going to be going Cup racing next year. Spire Motorsports going to have a partnership with Trackhouse Racing. Obviously, Spire Motorsports has acquired that charter from Live Fast Motorsports, and they're going to have a partnership with Trackhouse Racing in 2024. Now, Frankie Minas has also stated publicly in the past, too, that he does want to move up to the Truck or Xfinity Series in 2024. But I think it'd be really cool for him to drive a championship caliber truck. Now, do I think that Frankie Minas is going to be a championship caliber driver with front row in 2024 in the Truck Series if he drives it? No, probably not, because I think Zane Smith and Ty Gillen are better drivers than Frankie Minas. But Frankie Minas, I think, like I said, has done a pretty good job in ARCA this year. He's only gotten, I think, one top 5 in his career in ARCA. But, like I said, the equipment that he's been in has not been the greatest in the world. I do believe that if he does get a chance and opportunity to drive with the team, I think he'll be very, very competitive, and I think he'll have a chance maybe win some races, and I think he would be absolutely a playoff threat and a contender because Frankie Minas really knows what he's doing. He's been racing for many, many years, and I think he will do a pretty good job racing in the Truck Series. He'll be able to learn a lot quicker. Obviously, the drivers in the Truck Series can be very, very cutthroat, and you got a lot of kids in there who race without their heads. But if Frankie does truly end up in the 38 truck next year, that would be a pretty good move. Now, if Frankie doesn't get the 38 truck next year, who could be contenders for it? Well, Brett Moffitt, people have mentioned recently because we know that he's going to be driving a 34 truck for Spire Motorsports in tomorrow's truck race at Talladega. We don't know if his future with AM Racing is past this year. He could go back to AM Racing in the Xfinity Series, but I don't know if he's going to drive it. Haley Deegan could also be a contender. There's been rumors that she could be headed to AM Racing Xfinity program in 2024. But if she does remain in the Truck Series next year, she could go to front row. There's other drivers like Matt DiBenedetto. I'll mention because Matt DiBenedetto does not have a ride for next year in 2024, and that would be a championship caliber ride if he ends up there. But like I said, going back to Frankie Minas, if he does truly end up heading there in 2024, that would be a pretty solid pickup and a pretty good move for him. We'll see if he does end up heading there, though, in 2024, because he does want to move up to the Truck Series in the 2024 season. And now we're going ahead to on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the 2024 NASCAR schedule. Now, we did have a couple pretty big announcements in regards to the 2024 schedule. We'll talk about them here in just a little bit. But Bob Pockrass, after one of the announcements came out, said that the 2024 schedule is likely going to be coming out next week. Now, there's been a lot of people asking what could the schedule look like for 2024, because like I said, the schedule has not been released at this point for the 2024 season. But there's been a lot of rumor chatter in regards to a couple different tracks. One of those tracks being Iowa Speedway. On the Door Bumper Clear podcast earlier in the week, they said that if Montreal does not get added to the NASCAR Cup Series schedule in 2024, there is a slim chance that Iowa Speedway could potentially be added to the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. It's a short track out in the Midwest that we've seen the Truck Series and Xfinity Series race at in the past, and IndyCar has revitalized that track in the last couple of years due to the partnership with Hy-Vee. And I've been saying for a long time that Iowa Speedway does deserve a Cup Series date. It was designed by Rusty Walls, and I think it'd be really cool for that track to get a date. And while the short track product in the package has not been as good in recent years, I do believe that Iowa could actually put on a good race because you do have multiple groups that are available where you can move around, and they could probably find a way to get multiple groups working at the track. So there is a chance that Iowa Speedway could end up getting added. You've also got Texas Motor Speedway. It's heavily rumored that Texas Motor Speedway is going to be moving to the spring. There's a lot of talk about a repave and reconfiguration happening, and they might reconfigure it into a super speedway. There's been some talk about that going into the future, which if you know me, I don't want Texas to be reconfigured into a super speedway, but if they do, it sounds like that could be a potential possibility, and Texas is likely to move to the spring. And finally, I want to talk about Montreal. Circuit Gilles Villeneuve has been heavily rumored to be added to the schedule for 2024 because there's been people saying to get your passports ready, head over there. But one of the biggest things is where they're going to put it on the schedule next year because you have the Formula 1 race. I originally believe that they were planning to have it as the final race on Fox's calendar, but you do have to remember one thing, that the F1 race is happening at the time they really originally wanted it. So that's one of the biggest issues coming up is they want to get Circuit Gilles Villeneuve on the schedule, but they're having a tough time getting it added to the Cup Series schedule. But then you have other things about there were rumors about Richmond doubleheader. That sounds like that's off the table. And one of the reasons why I believe the schedule hasn't been released yet for 2024 is because of the Olympic break. There's going to be a couple weeks where NBC is going to be focusing on the Olympics, and they're not going to be on Fox where they don't really focus on the Olympics. with them when that's happening. So unless they can move the race to the Fox again, but I don't want Fox to have more race than they already have because their coverage hasn't been the greatest in the world, right? So we'll see what happens with the 2024 schedule, but we're getting closer and closer. Hopefully it end up being released. There's been other tracks like Kentucky been rumored once again, and other tracks going to be getting a date. Charlotte, Roval sounds like it's going to be gone. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with the 2024 schedule, what ends up getting released, and what ends up getting finalized for 2024. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Dye. As it was announced on Wednesday afternoon that Daniel Dye will be driving the 43 for McAnally Hilgeman Racing in 2024. This has been rumored in the industry for the last few months. Obviously, we know that GMS Racing is shutting down at the end of 2023. So we were wondering where Daniel Dye was going to end up heading in 2024, and it'll be headed to McAnally Hilgeman Racing. I think this actually is kind of a career increase for him instead of a downgrade for him. McAnally Hilgeman Racing this year in the Truck Series, they have become a championship caliber team, especially with Christian Eckes, who I think is right now maybe the favorite to win the Truck Series Championship over guys like Corey Heim and Zane Smith at the moment, even Carson Hosbar, because Christian Eckes has had a lot of pace and speed. He's been the most consistent driver in the playoffs so far. And Jake Garcia has done a pretty good job as, I believe, a rookie this year. He's done a really good job with the team. Has had some really solid and really great performances. And a lot of people are going to say, well, why is he getting an upgrade considering he has struggled with GMS? And I will agree with you. He has not been that great with GMS Racing in 2023. But Daniel Dye did have a pretty decent run at Texas in the Xfinity Series, but I think he had a top 20 finish with Alpha Prime Racing, which again, I think is pretty good, all things considered, in your debut. Albeit he did end up spinning out on his own. But he did recover to finish, I think, 17th or 18th, which is still a very, very good run. And like I said, he has not had a good year in the Truck Series, but his family does have connections in the industry. And of course, he does have sponsorship and funding working with NASCAR. So it makes a lot of sense why he's getting the chance, a shot, and opportunity to continue driving next year. Now, for Daniel Dye being a sophomore driver in 2024, what are going to be his expectations? Well, number one, Daniel Dye is going to be expected to improve, and he's probably going to be expected to be a playoff contender in 2024, considering the ride that he's going into in 2024. This team has improved this year. They're getting a lot of stuff from GMS Racing, and their team is going to be expected, he's going to be expected to perform better in 2024. I think he might get some top fives, maybe a couple top tens. He has shown slight flashes of brilliance at times this year in 2023, but like I said, it hasn't been the greatest thing in the world. Let's talk about who else could be with McAnally Hilgeman Racing, though, in 2024. I would say that Jake Garcia more than likely is coming back into the team in 2024. He's done a really good job with the team. He's at times been a playoff threat and contender with the organization. So I think that he could potentially come back. And I'm starting to think Christian Eckes more than likely could end up back in the 19 truck once again in 2024. There have been some industry chatter about him potentially headed to Calling Racing in 2024. But I'm thinking now that Christian Eckes more than likely is going to return to McAnally Hilgeman Racing's team in the 2024 season, which I think would be a really, really good move for the team. So we could have a lineup of Christian Eckes, Jake Garcia, and Daniel Dye going into 2024. I'm glad to see that Daniel Dye does have a ride for 2024. He was the most likely expected to get a ride for 2024. The big question now revolves around Roger Groove, Grant Enfinger, where they're going to end up going into 2024. We now know for sure another big silly season bomb, and that is Daniel Dye for sure returning to McAnally Hilgeman in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the first of three major stories in today's episode as we're talking about North Wilkesboro. Now, a few weeks ago, there have been some talk and chatter about potentially North Wilkesboro maybe getting a points-paying race on Easter in 2024. With Bristol Dirt being gone, there have been some chatter about that. Well, it sounds like, and it was confirmed yesterday, that is not going to be happening because in 2024, North Wilkesboro is going to host the All-Star Race once again in the 2024 season. The Cars Tour, Late Model Tour, and all the other late model races are going to happen throughout the week from, I think, May 14th up to May 17th. And then on May 18th will be the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race once again at the track. And then the All-Star Race will take place on May 19th. So once again will be the week before the Coca-Cola 600. But the big significant change when it comes to North Wilkesboro for 2024 is that North Wilkesboro is going to have a repave next year. So they're planning to repave the racetrack. There's been some talk they were maybe going to repave it after 2024, after they had a points-paying race, but they're going to repave it for 2024. Now, look, a lot of people are really, really disappointed by Norfolk Wilkesboro getting the All-Star race once again. I personally would love to see them get a points-paying race for 2024. But let's be for real, the short track package has not been very, very good. I know Norfolk Wilkesboro historically hasn't always put on the greatest racing in the world over the years back in the day. But I do believe that it could be a lot better if we had like the Gen 6 car at the track than we had with the next-gen car. But I think it's actually a really, really good excuse for them to get the All-Star race in 2024 because if they actually run it like on a repave, they have the excuse now to say, oh, our short track product sucks, because I think it's going to be a few years before we get the short track product good again because, like I said, the short track product in NASCAR right now, along with the road course product, has been very, very underwhelming in the past. And we know that this year has not been very, very good. The last year, especially for short tracks historically, have been really, really good. I think Richmond Spring is kind of an exception. There's been other race times that have shown flashes of brilliance. I think the Bristol night race actually was pretty good as well, even though they didn't run the short track package there. But again, I think that this isn't a bad decision overall. I really wish Norfolk Wilkesboro was getting a points-paying race on Easter. It would have made a lot of sense for it to happen. But now they do have the excuse to where they could use the Norfolk Wilkesboro day and use it with the repave there. Now, the big question that also needs to be asked is what track is going to get the Easter date? I'm starting to think Bristol is going to get the Easter date once again in 2024, which I think would be a very, very bad move for NASCAR if they end up doing that. Weather is a big reason for that. Out of the last 10 years, since 2014, only 4 times we have had perfect racing, or perfect weather for that time, I should say. Really, since 2013, only 4 out of the last 11 years. 2014 got delayed, 2015 got delayed, 2017 got postponed, 2018 got postponed, 2020 because of COVID, and then, of course, 2021 because of the weather as well. In 2022, we had rain delays and such. To me, I think the spring Bristol date should be moved to May or June. It would make a lot more sense for the weather. Go back to 2020 when the weather was actually a lot better for that event. I think it would make a lot more sense if they ended up doing that. But it sounds to me like they're maybe going to be hosting the Easter date again for 2024, which, again, I'm not a fan of them doing that because I think Bristol running on Easter, while it would make sense at times, the weather's been a big issue for the track, and that would hurt. But going back to Norfolk Wilkesboro, at least is going to be on the schedule in 2024. It's a shame it's not a points-paying race. I would have loved, like I said, to see it as a points-paying race in the 2024 calendar. But at least on a positive note, we're going to get Norfolk Wilkesboro next year once again, which I think is really, really great to see. It is disappointing they're also repaving it, but the track's been coming up. They had patches on the track too, so they had to do something with the racetrack in order to keep it on the schedule long term. Glad to see, though, that at least it will be coming back in the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series season for the All-Star race. I'm glad it's not going to be going back to a different track. Some people thought maybe Charlotte was going to get the All-Star race as well, but Charlotte sounds like they may be getting 2 points paying race anyways on the Oval in 2024. But glad to see the Norfolk Wilkesboro at least will be back on the NASCAR schedule in 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next major story of today's episode as we're talking about the Brickyard 400. Now, there have been a lot of talk that the Brickyard 400 was likely to be coming back in 2024, and yesterday afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the 2024 announcement of the Brickyard 400. The Brickyard 400 is coming back in 2024. It will take place on July 21st, 2024, after a 3-year absence where NASCAR has been racing on the Indianapolis road course the last few years. The Brickyard 400 returns for the 30-year anniversary. It absolutely makes a lot of sense. There's been a lot of chatter about this over the last year. In fact, there have been some talk that maybe they're even going to bring the Brickyard 400 back even for this year in 2023. But I am very pumped up and excited to see the Brickyard 400 is coming back in 2024. Because while I do love going to Indianapolis and I enjoyed the Indy road course races here in 2023, and yes, the racing product was not that good with the Brickyard the last years when he actually raced on the original Oval, I think it actually makes a lot of sense. First reason is because of the 30-year anniversary. It's been 30 years since the Brickyard happened in 1994, and it made way too much of sense to not have this race on the Oval. So many drivers in NASCAR have won this prestigious event. Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, Dale Jarrett, Jeff Gordon, Dale Sr., Bill Elliott's won, Tony Stewart, you name it. The list of drivers have won this event has gone on in legend sport. Jimmy Johnson as well have all won this event. And I think they're all probably really happy as well, or most of them are very happy to see the Brickyard 400 coming back. And I think most drivers, and we all know the drivers really wanted the Brickyard 400 to return in 2024 because while they probably love coming to Indy, they'd rather be on the oval. Now, a lot of people are asking, how will the racing product be? Well, I think the racing product actually could be a little bit better than what we've seen with other cars. And one of the reasons is because this track is kind of similar to Pocono. And I think Pocono, the last 2 years especially, have put on a really, really good racing product there. So I think the racing actually could be very, very good as well. And I think we could see some decent racing. It doesn't have to be top-tier racing. I don't think it's going to be top-tier. But I think it will be better than what we've seen in previous years as well. Let's talk about something else, the attendance. A lot of people are going to be talking about the attendance numbers. Well, I think attendance could be something that's really, really important to talk about, Sven, because Indianapolis does hold 250,000 fans. And I don't think you're going to get 250,000 people showing up to Indianapolis. That's just not going to happen unless it is the Indianapolis 500. But I actually think there's a good chance that this could be the biggest crowd since 2009. Because this event is going to get promoted a lot, and I think a lot of people are actually going to put their money where their mouth is. NASCAR fans do that a lot of times, and they do show up. We've even seen attendance numbers increase for pretty much every single track throughout the last years. I think the Indy Road Course race actually have more people show up for that than previous years, and I think a lot of people will show up for the NASCAR Cup Series race at Indianapolis once again. But not only that, another crown jewel returning to the NASCAR schedule. That's another thing that I think is really, really exciting about the Brickyard 400 returning in 2024. But something really, really awesome, really special about this as well is, again, you got Kyle Larson has a chance to become the first driver to win the Indy 500 and the Brickyard 400 in the same year. No one's ever done that before, and there's a good chance that that could end up happening, where history is made right there. But I think another cool thing is, again, I think this will get a huge TV number. But I do think there's a little bit of a missed opportunity here. I want to shout out the Iceberg on YouTube, Jarrett, for talking about this. But I really think they could have moved this race maybe to a little bit later in the year, maybe be to the second to last race of the regular season. What it sounds like this is going to be the last race before the Olympic break, which, again, you're going to have a lot of people tuning in, but they could have had this race after the Olympics because they could have promoted the hell out of this race. But I do expect that NASCAR is going to promote this race a lot, because the more they promote this race, the more likely people are going to tune in. With it being Indianapolis Motor Speedway, that moniker with the legendariness of Indianapolis, it just made a lot of sense. Like I said, I think the Indy Road Course race this year was actually really, really good this year compared to previous years. A lot of that was the playoff implications, and there was a lot of runoff area where it could be able to pass, because we know the next car road courses hasn't been the greatest thing in the world. That being said, I think it's a great decision to bring Indianapolis back, the Brickyard 400 back for 2024. I'm glad they're bringing it back, and I think it will be a better racing product than we've seen the last time we were there. And I think the Proceeders event just makes way too much sense to bring it back. It's awesome. It's great to see. And that's another major schedule announcement which has been rumored the last few months, and I think that we'll see some good racing. So very happy to see that the Brickyard 400 is coming back. What's really cool is on my mom's birthday, so that's really cool to see that I can celebrate my mom's birthday on the same time as well. So very happy nonetheless to see that the Brickyard 400 is officially returning in 2024. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Spire Motorsports. Now, I already talked about the story on Wednesday, but we was reported by Adam Stern and multiple other reporters that Spire Motorsports is likely going to be buying everything from Kyle Busch Motorsports. And they're going to buy the assets, they're buying the team, and they're going to be buying the shop as well. Well, it was officially confirmed about 2 hours after I filmed that video that Spire Motorsports has officially bought Kyle Busch Motorsports. They have not just bought Kyle Busch Motorsports, they have bought everything. They've bought Routing Manufacturing, which has been a manufacturing company, and the CNC shop as well. And they have bought the 77,000-foot square shop as well. Now, Spire Motorsports, they are planning to run 3 trucks in the 2024 season. But when an announcement came out, Kyle Busch released a statement kind of explaining why he made the decision to sell Kyle Busch Motorsports to Spire Motorsports. And the reason he made a decision is because Brexton's race schedule is getting a lot bigger, and he's focusing on trying to win another NASCAR Cup Series championship. Kyle Busch Motorsports leaving the Truck Series at the end of 2023 is going to be very, very disappointing. It's one of the biggest shocking moves we have seen so far in this silly season, because a lot of us thought the KBM was going to be returning in 2024. Remember, Chase Purdy signed a contract extension with the team, and Nick Sanchez also signed a contract extension with Rev Racing, and Kyle Busch had already announced he was going to run 5 truck races in 2024. There's a lot of questions more than likely that are going to get announced at the press conference tomorrow. I believe there's a press conference scheduled at Talladega tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, where a lot of the questions about this purchase are going to be announced. But Spire Motorsports has been making a lot of moves. And a lot of people have been saying that they were just going to buy up the shop. Because Spire Motorsports, we know, they are going to be expanding in 2024. Remember, Spire Motorsports is going to be expanding from 2 to 3 Cup cars in 2024, so I kind of already talked about this, but they're going to have 3 full-time Cup teams next year. They're going to have Corey LaJoie in the 7. Carson Nosvar is more than likely going to be in the 77 car in 2024, and then, of course, you do have Zane Smith driving the 78 car next year as well for Spire Motorsports. So they were going to be expanding. And again, I think a lot of us thought they would be buying the shop, but didn't think they'd be buying KBM. It's crazy to think going into next year, you're going to have 2 big organizations gone. In the last 7 or 8 years, I believe that KBM and GMS have won 55 or 60% of the races and a majority of the championships. And Busch Motorsports has housed some very, very big names who've gotten opportunities and chances and have gotten opportunities to race with Kyle Busch. Bubba Wallace, William Byron, Harrison Burton, Noah Gragson have raced against Kyle Busch in the last few years. Chris Rebel's won a championship. Eric Jones has won a championship with the team. They've had other drivers get a chance and opportunity to run for the organization as well over the years. 100 wins. They got their 100th win this year, and it's crazy to think that this team is shutting down. Because, again, I don't think anybody except industry members thought that this was going to be coming, because this had been rumored like a few days ago before this was officially announced. But it's crazy to think that Busch Motorsports is going to be shutting down at the end of this year. We all thank Kyle Busch for everything he's done for the sport. It's crazy to think after all they've accomplished, 100 wins in the series, they could still win in one of the final 3 weeks. But again, Kyle Busch said he's got a lot more focus on his kid, focusing on that side of racing at the moment, and that's a massive reason why he made the decision to sell off his team to Spire Motorsports. And according to what the asks are saying, I believe they spent $25 million. So Spire Motorsports in the last 2 or 3 months, they have spent $65 million. And it just shows the Spire Motorsports taking everything seriously. A lot of people are asking, where does Spire Motorsports get all that money to make this move? Well, one, I believe Spire Motorsports before was kind of like a financing company, and they basically had financing. They bought the BK Racing charter, and they spent like $6 million on that BK Racing charter back in 2017 or 2018 is when they ended up buying the charter from them. But then you obviously know that they have a big partnership with Gamebridge. Andretti Global has been coming in, and there's a lot of people that believe that Andretti Global is eventually going to take over the Spire name, or maybe Andretti Spire could eventually become the name in the future, because a lot of people believe Andretti's looking to get into NASCAR, and that's the way they're getting in, because Gamebridge has a massive, massive partnership with the team, and an owner of that downtown is, of course, a co-owner of Andretti Global. Now, the other big question needs to be asked is what happens to the drivers of Busch Motorsports, that being Chase Purdy and Nick Sanchez. Do they get integrated into Spire Motorsports, or do they lose their contracts? I would assume that Rev Racing could stick around next year in 2024 with Nick Sanchez, because Gamebridge does have a huge partnership with Spire and, of course, with Rev Racing. So maybe, just maybe, they'll stick around with Nick Sanchez, have their own entity, or maybe they bring Nick Sanchez into the organization as a whole. Chase Purdy, I would expect, probably is going to be joining Spire Motorsports next year in their 7 truck. That's what I'm thinking at this point, or one of the other trucks they do end up running next year. That's what I'm thinking, because I think that contract will go to Spire Motorsports in 2024, because he does have sponsors and funding that work with them, and I think Spire may be looking for that, even though they have that Gamebridge money coming into play. But then I think about other drivers who could potentially get a chance and opportunity to drive for the team. Let's start off Marco Andretti. Marco Andretti has said publicly that he would love to run full-time in the truck series in 2024, and he's been mentioned at times in points throughout the year that he could want to run more races. He made his debut in the truck series with them in Mid-Ohio, so maybe, just maybe, we see him go and end up driving for Spire Motorsports in 2024 in select race, or maybe full-time. What about Roger Carruth? Roger Carruth, he doesn't have a ride for 2024, and he's been kind of rumor mentioned in the past few months about potentially headed to Spire Motorsports in the 2024 season. Maybe, just maybe, we see him end up driving for the team. I'll mention Matt DiBenedetto as well. Matt DiBenedetto does not have a ride for 2024, and I think Spire Motorsports would be a pretty good team to work with. They have kind of a partnership with Hemric Motorsports, I believe, so maybe, just maybe, we see him go there in 2024. That'd be a pretty big pickup for him. And I would also expect there's a chance he'll have an all-star truck for the team, and I think that's where Kyle Busch could make his 5 starts next year, because Kyle Busch wants to probably still run 5 races in 2024. So maybe he goes there. I would expect Kyle Larson's probably going to drive for the team. Maybe that's where SVG goes. Shaman Gisberg makes a few starts with them next year in 2024. But going back to Spire Motorsports, they're making huge moves in the last months. They've been the biggest shakeup, and I think they have been the most interesting team when it comes to this silly season. They're making some huge, big bombshell moves over the last few months. They've obviously got that charter from Lit Fast, and then, of course, they're making other big moves that are absolutely huge and absolutely insane. Now, going to next year, I think Spire Motorsports is going to be a championship caliber team next year. I think you will have 3 trucks in 2024. I think, nonetheless, it's really exciting. I think silly season is going to get crazier and crazier by the month. And I think it's just crazy to think that there is not going to be a Spire, there's not going to be a KBM next year, and there's not going to be a GMS Racing in 2024. Absolute crazy and absolutely wild. Those things are not going to be happening in 2024. It's disappointing that Kyle Busch Motorsports is being sold off, but I think Kyle Busch really wants to focus on winning a Cup championship, and also other family ventures have come into way. The question being, will Kyle Busch ever get back in the Truck Series and open up a team again? There's certain possibilities. Some have been theorizing maybe that RCR could open up a truck team again, and maybe Kyle Busch is an owner of the organization. That's something to keep an eye on going into the future. We'll see what happens in regards to that, and we'll see that. But nonetheless, it's disappointing to see that Kyle Busch Motorsports is being sold. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your thoughts about Spire Motorsports officially buying Kyle Busch Motorsports? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And how excited are you that the Brickyard 400 is returning in 2024? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we'll have the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race view from Talladega Super Speedway. Then on Sunday, we'll have the NASCAR Cup Series race view from Talladega Super Speedway. And then on Monday, there should be a NASCAR news video on the channel. And then Tuesday, if the schedule does not end up getting released, there'll likely be a silly season update or something along those lines dropping on the channel. And then, of course, a lot of other great content that's going to be dropping over the last few months as we get closer to the end of the 2023 year. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.